the intolerance that is emerging in our political processes is represented by the impeachment fiasco, which unfolds before us day by day. And I talk very little about it. I've said almost nothing over the past month or two, as I could see that it was going to that. I comment from time to time that I expected that they were far too invested to abandon the track toward impeachment. And what I've concluded is that the great risk to President Donald J. Trump, who arguably, if you disregard his personality and his bare knuckles tweets and his you punch me, I'll punch you back twice as hard approach to life, I've characterized him before, as I see him, as a New York street fighter type. And although he wears high-dollar suits and flies on a private jet, he was a billionaire before he decided to become a public servant. And I'm reminded of a quote that was sent to me by one of my friends in Golden City. And the quote essentially, I don't have it in front of me, so I'm going to say this from memory. The people need not the tax return of a billionaire who became a public servant. The people need to see the tax returns of public servants who became millionaires while on the public service roll. And I am keenly aware that many who go to Congress do so with lofty aspirations and goals to make a difference and so forth. And the corruption, which is now much more visible to us on these streets of America in flyover country than it has ever been in the past, is exactly why I'm concerned that the impeachment of President Donald J. Trump will end in a conviction in the Senate, because the swamp creatures in the Senate and the establishment Republicans, who by right, if they respect the people and the job that Donald J. Trump has done as president, if you look at his performance in office, in his promises made, promises kept, if you set aside the parts of his personality and his public persona that may be offensive to you and may be deeply offensive, but if you look at what he has accomplished in terms of what he said he was going to do and what he has strived to accomplish, he arguably is the most successful president in my lifetime in terms of laying out an agenda and doing everything possible to accomplish it. It is not his accomplishments in office that the swamp creatures on both sides of the aisle despise him for. It is the fact that he is not a swamp creature. I think he honestly, genuinely has a deep-seated care and concern for the people of America and the American way of life. And I think perhaps better positioned than anyone on the face of the planet to see deep inside the swamp and just how corrupt it has become. They are afraid of that man, and I think they are desperately afraid of Attorney General Barr and the investigation being done by Durham, the special counsel, because I believe what he has the opportunity to do, if you just visualize Washington, D.C. as contained in a 55-gallon, old-fashioned 55-gallon steel drum full of toxic waste, and it has got a seal on it. And if you've ever worked blue collar, if you've ever been around a shipping yard or a fuel depot or anything of the nature, you may know that old-fashioned 55-gallon steel drums had a lip around them that you would curl back with a screwdriver or some other tool. And as you got, if you started at one point, say at 12 o'clock on the circumference of the top of the barrel, and you started at 12 o'clock and you started peeling these ribs up, they're about an inch wide, one by one by one. When you get far enough around, maybe a quarter of the way or a third of the way around, you can then peel the whole lid off. I think Donald J. Trump has the capacity and, more importantly, the will to peel the lid off of all the corruption in Washington, D.C., within the Beltway, and to reveal it to the American people and to tip that barrel over it and try to pour it out and truly drain the swamp. God help him if he's willing to do that. God bless America. It will be a better nation for it if it occurs, because what we are seeing is a rapid, in the last 20 years, something that's been going on for 30 or 40 years, is this rise of the unelectable, unaccountable bureaucratic state as the shadow government in this country. What is happening now is those who essentially tried to execute a bloodless coup in this nation at the highest levels of our intelligence community and our law enforcement community are now being called out in a way that there is a faint hope in my spirit that after years of seeing no one account for things like, and this is going to sound partisan, but it's not partisan, when Hillary Rodham Clinton received a subpoena for all of her devices that contained email traffic on her unsecured email server, her staff, probably known to law enforcement, did a variety of things to destroy evidence. They took hammers and destroyed smartphones and other devices. They used a product called BleachBit, which by analogy to bleach is a way to not only take a hard drive that has been reformatted, but in order to avoid the forensic reconstruction of what was on the hard drive by those who have that incredibly rarefied skill to do so, after you reformat a hard drive to wipe out what most normal IT persons could never recover, you then use BleachBit to basically re-wipe it. They used BleachBit to make sure that nothing that was on those devices could ever be recovered. And they did so with the proverbial middle finger to the courts and the law enforcement community. And why no one has been indicted for that manifest destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice is very discouraging to me as a lawyer, as someone who believes that the Democrats these days are bleating like a bunch of goats or sheep about how no one is above the law. I offer the publicly documented destruction of evidence and obstruction of justice by Hillary Rodham Clinton, and not because it is partisan and because I despise her politics, but because it is a conspicuous example that those inside the Beltway, if they're on the right side of the aisle, are in fact above the law. And I don't care where this investigation by Durham goes or what Attorney General Barr does with it. It will be vilified as a partisan exercise in retaliation. But I, as someone who believes that this country must have a system of laws which apply to everyone, that people in the highest levels of office are not immune from prosecution for the same things that would put you or me or any one of our so-called commoner friends behind bars for many, many years. If we abandon that requirement as citizens of this great nation, then we might as well kiss it goodbye, because it will not be long before the oligarchy entrenches itself even more so than it already is.